The afternoon sun slanted through the grand windows of the Grimwolf estate, casting long shadows across the marble floor where Scarlet stood, her white hair falling like fresh snow against the crimson fabric of her dress. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, a gesture she'd learned to disguise as casual adjustment, but her sister's sharp eyes missed nothing. My, Celeste's voice dripped with venomous honey as she circled Scarlet like a predator. You've gotten fat, haven't you, little sister? The words hung in the air between them, heavy and cruel. Scarlet felt the familiar sting of humiliation crawl up her spine, but she remained still, her violet eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the window. Beyond these walls, beyond this moment that felt designed to break her. The Alpha King's Omega, Celeste continued, her laughter sharp as broken glass. Looking more like a common breeding sow than royalty. How disappointed he must be. Scarlet's fingers tightened imperceptibly against the soft swell hidden beneath red silk. Inside her, 2 heartbeats echoed her own, a secret symphony only she could hear. 2 lives, precious and perfect, growing stronger each day. The future heirs to the Mooncrest throne, unknown to everyone except their father. She could have spoken, could have revealed the truth that would wipe the smugness from Celeste's painted face. But Scarlet had learned patience in the 6 months since she'd become Nikolai's mate. She learned that some victories were sweeter when they arrived unexpected, like the first snow of winter. Are you quite finished? Scarlet's voice was soft, but it carried a strength that made Celeste's smile falter for just a heartbeat. I'm only concerned for you, dear sister. Celeste adjusted her emerald gown, the color chosen deliberately to complement her auburn hair. Everything Celeste did was calculated, designed to wound. After all, if the Alpha King no longer finds you desirable, where will that leave you? Scarlet turned then, meeting her sister's gaze with calm defiance. Let Celeste think what she wished. Let her believe herself victorious in this small, petty war. When spring came, when the twins were born, the truth would shine brighter than any spiteful words could tarnish. I know exactly where I stand, Scarlet said quietly, and walked past her sister, leaving Celeste's confusion trailing in her wake like perfume. The palace corridors stretched before her, familiar now after months of walking them. She'd come to know every tapestry, every carved column, every window that looked out over the vast Mooncrest territory. But she'd never felt quite at home here, not until Nikolai. She found him where she always did in the late afternoon, in the war room, bent over maps and reports, his long black hair falling forward to hide his face. Even from the doorway, she could see the tension in his broad shoulders, the weight of leadership he carried like armor. My king, she said softly, and watched his entire body transform. The change was instantaneous, miraculous. The harsh lines of his face softened, the predatory stillness of his posture melted into something warm and welcoming. When Nikolai turned to her, his dark eyes held nothing of the fierce Alpha King who commanded armies and struck fear into enemies. They held only love, fierce and protective, and entirely hers. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. Scarlet. Her name was a prayer on his lips. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted every rumor whispered about the ruthless Mooncrest ruler. What's wrong? I can feel your distress through our bond. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the warmth of his palms. Celeste, she said simply, and felt his whole body go rigid. What did she say? His voice dropped to a growl, the Alpha rising swift and dangerous. I'll have her removed from the palace. I should have done it months ago. No. Scarlet placed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. She doesn't matter, Nikolai. None of them matter. Only this. She guided his hand to her stomach, to the life they'd created together. Only us. The transformation happened again, rage melting into tenderness. Nikolai dropped to his knees before her, pressing his forehead against her belly with a reverence that made her eyes sting with unshed tears. His beard was rough against the silk of her dress, his breathing deep and measured as he centered himself in her presence. "I heard their heartbeats this morning," he whispered against her. "Strong and steady, like war drums, like promises." "They're going to be magnificent," Scarlett said, threading her fingers through his long black hair. "Just like their father." He looked up at her then, this man who had conquered territories and subdued rebellions, whose name made warriors tremble. And she saw such naked vulnerability in his expression that her breath caught. "I don't deserve you," he said. "I don't deserve any of this." "Perhaps not." She smiled, her fingers trailing along the sharp line of his jaw. "But you have us anyway, all three of us." The secret they kept was a burden and a blessing. The pregnancy had been confirmed by the royal physician in private, sworn to absolute silence by blood oath. The risk was too great otherwise, Nikolai had insisted. Too many enemies circled the Mooncrest throne, waiting for any sign of weakness, any opportunity to strike. An heir changed everything. 2 heirs changed the future itself. But keeping the secret meant enduring moments like today. Meant swallowing humiliation and wearing loose clothing and pretending her body's changes were something shameful rather than sacred. Nikolai rose, pulling her into his arms with infinite care. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin, her body cradled in his strength. This was where she belonged, where she'd always belonged even before fate had drawn them together. "Tell me about the first time you saw me," she said, a ritual between them, a story she never tired of hearing. She felt his smile against her hair. "The winter gathering, 3 years ago. You were 19, dressed in white like the first snow, and I thought you were a vision, something too pure and perfect to be real." His arms tightened around her. "I wanted to speak to you, but I was a fool, convinced I had no right to approach an Omega so lovely." "I saw you too," Scarlett admitted. "You terrified me. The Alpha King, so fierce and untouchable, surrounded by warriors and advisors. I thought you were carved from stone. Until you rescued that child from the ice, a servant's son who'd wandered onto the frozen lake. You went out there yourself, risking the ice breaking, and when you brought him back to shore, you were so gentle. You carried him like he was made of glass, and I saw then who you really were beneath the crown." Nikolai pulled back to look at her, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. "I felt you watching me. I looked up and met your eyes, and I knew. The bond snapped into place right there, instant and undeniable. You were mine, and I was yours, and nothing else in the world mattered. Except you thought an Omega like me would never accept an Alpha like you. I thought you deserved better than a man whose hands were stained with blood, whose reputation was built on violence and conquest." Scarlett caught his hand, bringing it to her lips. "These hands have only ever been gentle with me. These hands hold our children even now, protecting them through me. I couldn't ask for better." He kissed her then, soft and deep, a communion of souls that transcended the physical. Through their bond, she felt his love pour into her, filling all the hollow places Celeste's words had tried to carve out. She was cherished. She was wanted. She was his queen in every way that mattered, even if the official coronation would wait until after the birth. "Stay with me tonight," Nikolai murmured against her lips. "I'll send word to your family that you're needed at the palace. I want you in our bed, safe in our chambers where no one can hurt you with their petty words." "They'll talk," Scarlett warned. "They already whisper about how much time I spend here. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. In a few months, they'll know the truth, and their whispers will turn to awe." His hand splayed possessively over her stomach. You're carrying the future of the Mooncrest line. You're carrying our sons. You're the most important person in this entire kingdom, and I won't have you subjected to cruelty under your own family's roof." The certainty in his voice made her believe it, made her believe that she was more than the overlooked younger sister, more than the Omega everyone had dismissed as too plain, too quiet, too unremarkable. Nikolai saw her as she truly was, and in his eyes, she was magnificent. That night, wrapped in his arms in the vast bed of the royal chambers, Scarlet felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Through the windows, she could see the moon hanging full and bright over the territory, casting silver light across the snow-covered landscape. "What will you name them?" Nikolai asked, his voice rumbling through his chest where her head rested. "When they're born, what names will you give our sons?" Scarlet had thought about this constantly, turning over names like precious stones, searching for the ones that felt right. "I was reading," she said softly, "about the ancient founders of the old city. 2 brothers, abandoned and raised by wolves, who built an empire from nothing. Romulus and Remus," Nikolai said, understanding immediate. "The Wolf Kings. Would you approve?" She tilted her head to look up at him. "Or is it too presumptuous?" His laugh was low and warm. "It's perfect. Our sons, raised not by wolves but as wolves, future kings of their own empire." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Romulus and Remus Mooncrest. The names suit them." The babies moved then, a flutter of sensation that still amazed her every time. Nikolai's hand found the spot instantly, his palm warm against her skin, and together they felt their sons respond to their father's touch. "They know you," Scarlet whispered. "They're already reaching for you. As I reach for them, as I'll always reach for all of you." Nikolai shifted, settling more comfortably around her, his body a shield between her and the world. "Sleep now, my love. I'll keep watch." She wanted to protest, to tell him he needed rest too, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. The twins took so much energy, and the secrecy added its own weight. So she let herself drift, secure in the knowledge that Nikolai would guard them through the night, that his love was a fortress nothing could breach. The weeks passed in a strange duality. In public, at the mandatory social gatherings and court functions, Scarlet endured the stares and whispered comments. Celeste was relentless, never missing an opportunity to make cutting remarks about Scarlet's changing figure, her supposed loss of grace, her increasing absence from certain events. "The Alpha King's Omega can't even fit into proper court dress anymore," Celeste announced at a winter ball, her voice pitched to Carrie. Perhaps she should consider retiring to the country estates where her condition won't be so visible. The ladies around them tittered, but Scarlet noticed something new in their eyes. Uncertainty, calculation. The smarter ones had begun to wonder, to question why the Alpha King kept Scarlet so close, why he looked at her with such fierce devotion, why he'd dismissed 3 visiting alphas who'd suggested he might consider taking another mate, given his current Omega's apparent failings. "My mate is perfection," Nikolai had said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Any suggestion otherwise will be considered a personal insult to me and dealt with accordingly." No one had dared suggest it again. But in private, in the sanctuary of their chambers, life was entirely different. Nikolai was insatiable in his affection, constantly touching her, talking to the babies through her skin, making plans for a future that grew more vivid with each passing day. "We'll need to expand the nursery," he said one evening, poring over architectural drawings, "and increase security throughout the entire wing. No one gets near our sons without explicit approval." "They're not even born yet," Scarlet laughed, but warmth bloomed in her chest at his protectiveness. "They're mine to protect from this moment until my last breath." Nikolai looked up, his dark eyes intense. "Nothing threatens what's mine, Scarlet. Not politics, not enemies, not fate itself." She believed him, this man who was stone to the world but soft as candle wax for her. who could command armies but spoke to his unborn children with words of honey and promises. The duality of him never ceased to amaze her, the way he could shift from ruthless king to devoted mate in a heartbeat. As winter deepened, so did the bond between them. Scarlet learned to read his moods, to sense when the burden of leadership weighed too heavily, and he needed her touch to ground him. Nikolai learned every signal of her discomfort, adjusting pillows before she needed to ask, bringing her favorite foods before she realized she was hungry, drawing baths at the exact temperature that eased the growing ache in her back. "You spoil me," she told him one evening as he massaged her swollen feet with careful attention. "I worship you," he corrected. "There's a difference. Spoiling implies indulgence in excess. Worship is simply giving devotion where it's due." Nikolai Mooncrest, poet. She smiled down at him, this powerful alpha kneeling at her feet like a supplicant at an altar. Who would have guessed? Only for you. The rest of the world gets the conqueror. You get the man beneath. It was true. In meetings, she watched him command with absolute authority, his presence filling rooms until even the most ambitious advisors fell silent. He made decisions with decisive clarity, showed no mercy to those who threatened his people, and carried the weight of the kingdom on his shoulders without complaint. But the moment they were alone, he transformed. He was hers, completely and utterly, devoted to her happiness and well-being above all else. "Does it frighten you?" she asked one night, the question emerging from some deep place of honesty. "How much you love me?" Nikolai was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting over the swell where their sons grew. "Yes," he finally said. "It terrifies me. I've conquered enemies, survived battles that should have killed me, stared down death without flinching. But the thought of losing you, of anything harming you or our children, that fear lives in my bones like winter cold. You won't lose us. I'll make certain of it. I've doubled your guard detail, tripled security protocols, and personally vetted every servant who comes within 10 feet of you." His jaw tightened. "I've also begun investigating your sister." Scarlet's breath caught. "Celeste? Why?" "Her cruelty isn't random, love. She's too calculating, too persistent. I want to know what she's planning, what she hopes to gain from tormenting you. She's just jealous. She always has been, ever since we were children. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's more to it." Nikolai's expression hardened, the Alpha King emerging. "I've learned not to dismiss patterns of behavior, especially when directed at what I value most." The investigation revealed truths that cut deeper than Scarlet expected. Celeste had been meeting with members of the Blackthorn Pack, longtime rivals of the Mooncrests. She'd been feeding them information about palace schedules, security weaknesses, anything that might give them leverage, and she'd been telling them about Scarlet's condition, speculating about pregnancy, trying to paint Scarlet as weak and vulnerable, a perfect target. "She was going to use you." Nikolai's voice was arctic as he showed Scarlet the reports. "Use you and our children as pawns in some scheme to destabilize my rule and put herself in a position of power." Scarlet felt cold spread through her chest. "She's my sister. She's a traitor." Nikolai's hand was gentle on her shoulder despite the fury in his eyes. "And she'll be dealt with according to law. But not yet. Not until after the birth, when you and our sons are safe. What will you do?" "What I must. What I should have done the first time she hurt you." He turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "I failed to protect you from her words, Scarlet. I won't fail to protect you from her schemes." The knowledge of Celeste's betrayal sat heavy in Scarlet's heart, but it also brought clarity. Her sister's cruelty hadn't been merely personal jealousy. It had been calculated malice, designed to wound and weaken. Every insult, every public humiliation, had been part of a larger plan to undermine Scarlet's position, and by extension, Nikolai's rule. But Celeste had underestimated them both. She'd seen Scarlet's silence as weakness, not realizing it was strength. She'd missed the steel beneath the soft exterior, the queen waiting to be crowned. As winter melted into early spring, Scarlet's body grew heavier with the weight of the twins. Moving became difficult, sleep came in fragments, and the secret became harder to keep as her condition grew more obvious. The whispers in court grew louder, speculation running wild about why the Alpha King's Omega had grown so reclusive, why she appeared so changed. "They're saying she's ill," one of Scarlet's ladies-in-waiting reported quietly one afternoon, as she helped Scarlet into a flowing dress designed to conceal her shape. "Some speculate she's fallen out of favor." "Let them speculate," Scarlet said, though each rumor stung. She understood the necessity of secrecy, but that didn't make the isolation any easier to bear. Nikolai felt her distress through their bond and appeared moments later, dismissing the servants with a gesture. When they were alone, he gathered her into his arms with infinite care, mindful of her precious burden. "I hate this," he confessed against her hair. "I hate that you must endure their speculation, that I cannot announce to the world how magnificent you are, how miraculous. It won't be much longer." Scarlet breathed in his scent, wood smoke and winter pine, and felt herself settle. "When they're born, when everyone sees, it will all make sense. You're stronger than I am," Nikolai said, wonder in his voice. "I want to rage at anyone who speaks ill of you, who dares question your worth. But you remain calm, patient, secure in the knowledge of what's coming. Because I have you. Because I have them." She placed his hand over her belly, where the twins shifted restlessly. "This is real, Nikolai. Everything else is just noise." The next morning brought an unexpected challenge. Scarlet woke to find blood on the sheets. Not much, but enough to send panic coursing through her veins. She woke Nikolai with shaking hands, unable to speak past the fear closing her throat. He was on his feet instantly, calling for the royal physician with a roar that likely woke half the palace. Within minutes, the elderly doctor was examining Scarlet with gentle efficiency, while Nikolai paced like a caged wolf, his agitation palpable. "The babes are fine," the physician announced after what felt like an eternity. "Strong heartbeats, good positioning. Sometimes in twin pregnancies the body protests the burden. Complete bed rest for the next week, my lady. No walking, minimal stress." The relief was overwhelming, but so was the new restriction. A week stretched before Scarlet like a prison sentence, especially when she'd been so careful to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Nikolai, however, refused to let her wallow. He moved his work to their chambers, conducting meetings from beside her bed, his hand never far from hers. He read to her from philosophy texts and adventure novels, painted word pictures of the territory beyond the windows, and talked endlessly to their sons through her skin. "Your mother is the bravest person I've ever known," he told the twins one evening, his palm warm against her belly. "She's fighting to keep you safe, enduring discomfort and isolation and uncertainty. When you're grown, you'll understand what a gift that is, how much strength it requires." "They already know," Scarlet said softly. "I can feel them responding to your voice, settling when you speak. They recognize their father. As I recognize them." Nikolai's expression was tender. "My sons, my family, everything I never knew I needed until you walked into my life and changed everything." The bed rest period also brought unexpected visitors. Several of the older court ladies, those who'd already raised families of their own, seemed to divine the truth through some mysterious maternal intuition. They came bearing advice and well wishes, speaking in careful euphemisms that acknowledged what couldn't be said openly. "Resting is good for the body," Lady Ashford said meaningfully, her knowing eyes twinkling, "especially when carrying such precious cargo. The Alpha King seems particularly attentive lately. Lady Thornfield added. One might say overprotective, if one were inclined to notice such things. Scarlet smiled, grateful for their discretion and their support. These women, mothers and grandmothers themselves, understood the journey she was on. Their presence eased the loneliness, made the waiting more bearable. Even Margaret, the head housekeeper who'd served the Mooncrest family for 40 years, became an unexpected ally. She brought special teas and hearty broths, adjusted pillows with practiced hands, and shared stories of other difficult pregnancies she'd witnessed that had ended in joy. The waiting is the hardest part, Margaret said one afternoon, her weathered hands gentle as she arranged fresh flowers in a vase. But when you hold them for the first time, all the struggle fades like morning mist. You'll see, my lady, it will all be worth it. Everyone keeps saying that, Scarlet murmured, because it's true. I've seen countless babes born in this palace, but none will be as loved as yours. That Alpha King of yours, he's transformed. The man who walks these halls now bears little resemblance to the cold warrior who ruled alone. Love does that, makes us better than we were. The week of bed rest ended, but Scarlet's energy didn't return as expected. Moving remained difficult, her body heavy and unwieldy. The twins seemed to grow exponentially, taking up every available space, making breathing a conscious effort. I feel like a whale, she complained to Nikolai one evening, trying and failing to find a comfortable position. You look like a goddess, he countered, adjusting pillows behind her back. A fertility goddess, sacred and beautiful. You're required to say that. You're the one who did this to me, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, though watching you struggle breaks something in me each time. He knelt before her, taking her swollen feet in his hands and beginning a gentle massage. Tell me what you need. Anything, Scarlet. I'll move mountains if it brings you comfort. What she needed, she realized, was to feel normal again, even for a moment. To remember who she was beyond this vessel carrying the future of the kingdom. Take me outside, she said suddenly. Into the gardens. I want to feel the sun, smell the flowers. I want to remember there's a world beyond these walls. Nikolai hesitated, clearly torn between his desire to please her and his instinct to keep her protected. But he must have sensed how much she needed this, because he nodded slowly. At dawn, before anyone else is awake, just you, me, and a minimal guard detail. His expression was fierce. But if you feel any discomfort, any at all, we come straight back. The next morning, wrapped in a cloak against the early chill, Scarlet walked through the palace gardens on Nikolai's arm. The world was soft with pre-dawn light, everything touched with rose and gold. Dew sparkled on new leaves, and the air smelled of earth and growing things. This is where I first kissed you, Nikolai said, stopping near a fountain where water burbled over smooth stones. Remember? The spring gathering, 3 years ago. You wore a white dress and had flowers in your hair. You were so nervous, Scarlet remembered, smiling. The great Alpha King, terrified to kiss one Omega. Because you mattered. Because I knew even then that if I kissed you, I'd never want to stop. He cupped her face, his touch infinitely gentle. I was right. 3 years later, and I still can't get enough of you. He kissed her there in the dawn garden, soft and sweet, a reaffirmation of everything between them. When they parted, Scarlet felt renewed, reminded that beneath the weight she carried and the role she played, she was still herself, still the woman Nikolai loved, still the person who'd found courage in quiet moments. The walk did her good, but it also exhausted her completely. By the time they returned to their chambers, Scarlet was trembling with fatigue, her body protesting the exertion. Nikolai settled her into bed with worried efficiency, calling for the physician to ensure no harm had been done. The babies are fine, the doctor assured them after examination. But my lady must conserve her energy now. We're in the final stretch. Any day now, those babes will decide they're ready to enter the world. Any day now, The words hung in the air, exciting and terrifying in equal measure. That night, unable to sleep, Scarlett found herself talking to the twins, her hands resting on her belly, feeling their movements respond to her voice. "I'm your mother," she told them softly. "And I promise you, I'll be the best mother I can be. I'll protect you and guide you and love you unconditionally. Your father and I will teach you to be strong but gentle, powerful but kind. We'll show you that true strength comes from compassion, that leadership means service." Beside her, Nikolai stirred from his light doze. "They hear you," he murmured. "They know your voice as well as mine." "I'm scared," Scarlett admitted, voicing the fear she'd been holding close. "What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this?" "You can. You will. You're the strongest person I know, Scarlett." Nikolai pulled her closer, his arms a fortress around her. "And you won't be alone. I'll be right there, every step of the way. We'll face it together, as we face everything." The reassurance settled something in her chest, easing the anxiety that had been building. Together. They would face this monumental task together, as they'd faced everything else. 2 days later, in the small hours of the morning when the world was still and quiet, Scarlett woke to the unmistakable sensation of water breaking. She touched Nikolai's shoulder, her voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. "It's time. Soon," Nikolai promised her during a particularly difficult night when the babies seemed determined to dance inside her. His hands worked gentle circles over her stomach, soothing his restless sons. "Soon you'll hold them, and all of this will be worth it." "It's already worth it," Scarlett gasped, as another wave of pressure rolled through her. Every moment, every sacrifice, they're worth everything. The first contraction came on a morning wrapped in fog, the world outside their windows soft and indistinct. Scarlett gripped Nikolai's hand, feeling the pull and release of her body preparing for the monumental task ahead. "It's time," she whispered, and watched his face transform with a mixture of terror and joy so profound it made her want to weep. What followed was hours of intensity, of pain and pressure, and the strange otherworldly focus that came with bringing new life into existence. The royal physician worked with quiet efficiency, murmuring encouragement, while Nikolai stayed at Scarlett's side, refusing to leave even when tradition dictated he should. "I'm not leaving her," he'd growled when the physician had suggested it. "She's brought me this far. I'll see it through to the end with her." So he stayed, holding her hand, whispering words of love and strength, his presence an anchor in the storm of sensation. Scarlett clung to him, to the bond between them, using it as a lifeline when the pain threatened to overwhelm her. "You're magnificent," Nikolai breathed against her temple as another contraction peaked. "So strong, so brave. Our sons are lucky to have you as their mother." "Tell me about them," Scarlett gasped. "Tell me about our future." So he did. He painted pictures with words, describing lazy summer afternoons teaching the twins to hunt, winter evenings by the fire telling them stories of their heritage, springs watching them grow into the men they were meant to become. He talked until his voice went hoarse, giving her something to focus on beyond the physical ordeal, reminding her what all this struggle would bring. The pain intensified, waves crashing over her with increasing frequency. Scarlett heard herself cry out, beyond caring about dignity or composure. This was raw, primal, the most fundamental act of creation stripped of all pretense. "Almost there," the physician encouraged. "I can see the first babe's head. One more push, my lady." Scarlett bore down with everything she had, feeling something fundamental shift inside her. The pressure reached an impossible peak, then suddenly released as the first baby slid free into the world. The first baby arrived as dawn broke through the fog, his cry sharp and indignant, announcing his presence to the world. The physician cleaned him quickly, wrapped him in soft blankets, and placed him in Nikolai's waiting arms. "Romulus," Nikolai breathed, staring down at his son with such naked awe that Scarlet felt tears stream down her face. "Hello, my son. Welcome home." The baby's cries softened at his father's voice, dark eyes opening to fix on Nikolai's face with startling focus. In that moment, watching her mate hold their firstborn son, Scarlet felt her heart expand to accommodate a love so vast it seemed impossible to contain. But there was no time to rest. The second baby was already making his presence known, another contraction building with inexorable force. The physician moved with practiced efficiency, guiding Scarlet through the process again. This time, Nikolai held Romulus in one arm while supporting Scarlet with the other, refusing to put down his son even as he helped his mate through bringing his brother into the world. The second baby followed 20 minutes later, just as vocal as his brother, just as perfect. Remus joined his twin in their father's arms, two dark-haired bundles of potential, the future of the Mooncrest line made flesh. Scarlet watched through exhausted, joy-blurred eyes as Nikolai held their sons, this fierce alpha king reduced to trembling wonder by two tiny beings. He looked up at her, and she saw tears tracking through his beard, saw love so profound it seemed to fill the room like light. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for them. Thank you for being mine." "We're all yours," Scarlet whispered. "Always." The physician finished her work, ensuring Scarlet was clean and comfortable, checking the babies one more time before discreetly withdrawing. She posted guards at the door with strict instructions. No one was to disturb the new family unless summoned. Alone finally, Nikolai carefully arranged the twins in Scarlet's arms. She looked down at their tiny faces, so similar, yet already showing distinct personalities. Romulus had his eyes open wide, staring at everything with fierce curiosity. Remus had his eyes closed, content to sleep against his mother's warmth. "They're perfect," Scarlet breathed. "Look at them, Nikolai. We made them. These perfect little beings came from us. From you." Nikolai sat beside her on the bed, his large frame somehow fitting into the space without disturbing mother or babies. "You carried them, nurtured them, brought them safely into this world. You're a miracle, Scarlet." She leaned against him, bone-weary but sublimely happy. "We're a family now. Truly a family. The family I never thought I'd have." Nikolai's finger traced Romulus's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers instinctively wrapped around his father's digit. I was content to be alone, to focus solely on duty and rule. Then you appeared and showed me everything I was missing. "I was invisible," Scarlet countered, the overlooked sister, too quiet to notice. "Then you saw me, really saw me, and everything changed." They sat in peaceful silence, watching their sons, marveling at tiny fingers and miniature features, at the reality of these lives they'd created. The morning sun strengthened outside the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. Eventually, Margaret appeared with food, her eyes misty when she saw the babies. "Oh, my lady, my lord," she breathed. "They're beautiful, just beautiful." "Twins," Nikolai said, pride evident in every syllable. "Sons, heirs. The kingdom will rejoice." Margaret set down the tray, her movements quiet and efficient. "Shall I send for the herald? Make the announcement?" "At noon," Nikolai decided. "Give us this morning, just the four of us, before the world intrudes." Those hours were sacred, a bubble of intimacy before everything changed. Scarlet learned to feed the babies, marveling at how they instinctively knew what to do. Nikolai changed their first diapers with amusing determination, refusing to summon servants for something so personal. "These are our sons," he insisted, wrestling with unfamiliar fabric and tiny kicking legs. "We should know how to care for them in all ways." By the time the announcement went out at noon, carried by messengers to every corner of the territory, Scarlet and Nikolai had found a rhythm. They worked together seamlessly, one rocking a fussy baby while the other tended his brother, both moving with the careful precision of new parents terrified of breaking something precious. The announcement went out at noon, carried by messengers to every corner of the territory. The Alpha King and his mate had produced twin heirs, both healthy, both strong. The Mooncrest succession was secure for generations to come. The reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Celebrations erupted throughout the kingdom, joy and relief mixing with surprise. The Alpha King had kept the pregnancy secret, protected his mate and children from potential threats, and now presented them to his people as a fait accompli. News arrived throughout the afternoon of bonfires lit in every village, impromptu festivals breaking out in town squares, citizens flooding into the streets to celebrate. The Mooncrest territory had waited years for heirs, and now they had two. It was a masterstroke of political maneuvering, and every rival pack recognized it immediately. The Mooncrest position was unassailable now, secured by two perfect heirs. Messages began arriving from allied territories, congratulations mixed with relief that the succession was secure. In the palace, reactions were more varied. Some celebrated genuinely, grateful for the stability the twins represented. Others scrambled to adjust their plans and allegiances, realizing the landscape had shifted dramatically overnight. Those who'd been positioning themselves to potentially challenge for the throne found their ambitions suddenly irrelevant. The royal advisors requested an audience, wanting to discuss the implications, plan the formal presentations, organize the celebrations. But Nikolai refused them all, posting guards with explicit instructions. No one disturbed his family unless it was a matter of immediate crisis. "Let them wait," he told Scarlet, as they watched the twins sleep in the elaborate bassinet that had been brought into their chambers. "They've had my entire life. Today belongs to us." And Celeste, when she heard the news, went pale as death. She'd been at a social gathering in the city when the announcement reached them, surrounded by other court ladies. The messenger had read the proclamation aloud, his voice carrying over the assembled crowd. "The Alpha King Nikolai Mooncrest and his mate Scarlet are pleased to announce the birth of twin sons, Romulus and Remus Mooncrest, born at dawn this morning. Both mother and babies are healthy and strong. The succession is secured. Long live the Mooncrest heirs." The crowd had erupted in cheers, but Celeste had simply frozen, realization crashing over her like ice water. Twins. Her sister had been pregnant with twins this entire time. Every insult, every mockery, every cruel comment had been made while Scarlet carried the future of the kingdom. "I need to go," Celeste had muttered, pushing through the celebrating crowd. She made it to an empty corridor before her legs gave out, forcing her to lean against the wall for support. She'd thought herself so clever, so superior. She'd taken pleasure in tormenting her younger sister, never imagining that Scarlet had been hiding such a monumental secret. The fat comments, the suggestions that Nikolai must be disappointed, all of it had been aimed at a woman who was literally carrying the heirs to the throne. The humiliation was complete and devastating, but worse than the embarrassment was the creeping realization of what else this meant. Scarlet was now untouchable, her position as queen assured. Any schemes Celeste had been nurturing, any plans to leverage her sister's supposed weakness, all of it turned to ash. She'd underestimated Scarlet completely, had seen patience as weakness, silence as submission. She'd failed to recognize the steel beneath her sister's quiet exterior, the strategic mind that had endured temporary humiliation for ultimate victory. Scarlet was resting when her sister was brought to the royal chambers, guards flanking her on either side. The new mother looked up from where she lay in the massive bed, a twin cradled in each arm, and felt a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction. "So it's true," Celeste said, her voice hollow. "You were pregnant this entire time." "I was." Scarlet adjusted Romulus slightly, his small fist gripping her finger with surprising strength. "Every time you called me fat, every time you humiliated me in public, I was carrying the Alpha King's heirs." Celeste's face twisted with rage and disbelief. You let me mock you. You stood there and took it. I did. Scarlet met her sister's eyes calmly. Because I knew the truth would be sweeter for the waiting. Because I knew that when these babies were born, when my position was secure, all your words would turn to ash in your mouth. You manipulative little... Careful. Nikolai's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood near the window, having been watching the exchange in silence. But now he moved forward with predatory grace. You're addressing the mother of my children, the future queen of the Mooncrest territory. I suggest you moderate your tone. Celeste's defiance crumbled under his stare. I didn't know. You didn't need to know. You only needed to be kind to your sister, and you couldn't manage even that basic decency. Nikolai's expression was ice. I know about the Blackthorns, Celeste. I know about the information you've been selling them, the schemes you've been plotting. All color drained from Celeste's face. I can explain. I don't care for explanations. I care for justice. He moved to stand beside Scarlet, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. You conspired with enemies of this kingdom. You attempted to harm my mate, and, by extension, my heirs. The punishment for treason is death. Silence fell like snow. Scarlet could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Romulus and Remus breathing softly against her, could sense the tension radiating from Nikolai's frame. However, he continued, his voice softening slightly as he glanced at Scarlet. My mate has a kind heart. She's asked that I show mercy, that I remember you're her sister despite everything you've done. Hope flickered across Celeste's face. So you'll live, Nikolai said. But you're banished from Mooncrest territory immediately. You'll be escorted to the border and warned that if you ever return, the original sentence will be carried out without hesitation. Consider this the only kindness you'll receive from me. Celeste opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once in her life, she seemed to have no words. She looked at Scarlet, at the babies in her arms, at the life her sister had built while Celeste had been too busy with cruelty to notice the foundation being laid. I'm sorry, Celeste finally whispered, and for the first time, she sounded genuine. I'm sorry for all of it, Scarlet nodded slowly. I believe you, but sorry isn't enough to undo the harm, Celeste. It's just enough to grant you your life. Use it better than you have so far. The guards escorted Celeste out, her footsteps echoing down the corridor, fading into silence. When she was gone, Nikolai exhaled slowly and sank onto the bed beside Scarlet, his large frame suddenly weary. Did I do right? He asked quietly. Sparing her? You did exactly right. You honored my wishes while protecting your kingdom. That's all I could ask. Scarlet leaned against him, feeling his warmth seep into her bones. It's over now. The secrets, the schemes, all of it. We can finally just be a family. Nikolai's arm came around her carefully, mindful of the babies. A family, he repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. I never thought I'd have this. A mate, children, a future filled with something other than duty and conquest. You have it now. We all do. Scarlet looked down at their sons, at these perfect tiny beings who had transformed everything. Romulus and Remus Mooncrest, future kings, currently interested in nothing more complex than sleeping and eating. Nikolai's laugh was soft and wondering. They're so small. How can they be so small and so important at the same time? Magic, Scarlet said simply. The magic of new life, of hope, of love. In the days that followed, the palace transformed into something new. The nursery, prepared in secret over months, was finally revealed in all its glory, a room designed with both beauty and security in mind. Guards stood constant watch outside the royal chambers, and visitors were carefully screened and limited. But inside those protected walls, life was soft and sweet and utterly perfect. Nikolai proved to be a devoted father, taking to the role with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He changed diapers with careful attention, walked the halls at night when one twin or the other grew fussy, and spent hours simply watching his sons sleep, as if he couldn't quite believe they were real. "You're going to spoil them," Scarlett said one afternoon, watching him fuss over Remus's blankets for the third time. "Impossible. They're princes. Spoiling them is part of the job description." But he smiled as he said it, and Scarlett saw the truth beneath the jest. Nikolai was simply giving his sons what he'd never had, a childhood wrapped in love and security, a foundation built on affection rather than duty. The coronation happened when the twins were 6 weeks old, a grand ceremony that formalized what everyone already knew. Scarlett was queen, and her sons were heirs to the throne. She stood beside Nikolai in a gown of red and silver, crown placed upon her white hair, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders alongside the jewelry. But she also felt the bond with Nikolai singing between them, felt the knowledge of her children safe in the royal nursery under heavy guard, felt the rightness of this moment that had been building since that winter gathering 3 years ago, when a fierce Alpha King had met the eyes of a quiet Omega and felt his world shift on its axis. "My queen," Nikolai said when the ceremony concluded, and kissed her before the assembled court. Propriety be damned. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Scarlett laughed against his lips, giddy with joy and relief and the sheer impossibility of how perfectly everything had fallen into place. That night, with the twins finally asleep after a long day of excitement, Scarlett and Nikolai stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the territory that was now truly theirs to rule together. "Tell me honestly," Scarlett said, leaning back against his chest as his arms wrapped around her. "Did you ever imagine this? When you first saw me at that winter gathering, did you think we'd end up here?" "No," Nikolai admitted. "I thought I'd watch you from afar and pine in silence, convinced I wasn't worthy of your grace. I certainly never imagined you'd accept me, let alone love me. And children?" His arms tightened. "That seemed like a dream too precious to even hope for. But we got it all anyway. Every impossible dream. We did. We fought for it. We protected it. We kept faith, even when keeping secrets hurt." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And now we have forever stretching out before us. A family to raise, a kingdom to nurture, a love to tend like a garden." Scarlett turned in his arms, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "I love you, Nikolai Mooncrest, my fierce king, my gentle husband, my children's devoted father. I love every part of you. And I love you, Scarlett Mooncrest, my wise queen, my perfect mate, my reason for breathing." He cupped her face with infinite tenderness. "You saved me from a life of cold duty. You gave me warmth, purpose, a future worth fighting for. Everything I am is yours." They kissed there under the stars, two souls bound by fate and choice, by destiny and determination. Behind them, through the open door, they could hear the soft sounds of their sons sleeping, the future secured in two small beating hearts. The months that followed were filled with the ordinary magic of new parenthood. Sleepless nights and joyful mornings, first smiles and tiny triumphs. Romulus proved to be bold and adventurous from the start, always reaching for new things, while Remus was more contemplative, watching the world with serious dark eyes that reminded Scarlett so much of his father. "They're going to be heartbreakers," she told Nikolai one afternoon, watching the 6-month-old twins play on a blanket spread across the floor of the royal sitting room. "Look at them, already so handsome, so perfect. They take after their mother." Nikolai was working through reports, but his attention kept drifting to his sons. "She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Flatterer. Truth-teller. There's a difference." He set aside his work and joined them on the floor, scooping up Romulus, who immediately grabbed his father's beard with both hands. "Easy there, warrior. That's attached." Scarlet rescued the beard, while Nikolai laughed, and Remus, not wanting to be left out, crawled over to join the pile. Soon, all four of them were tangled together on the floor, a tableau of domestic bliss that seemed impossible given where they'd started. "Do you ever miss it?" Scarlet asked during a quiet moment. "The simplicity of before, when it was just duty and conquest, no complications?" Nikolai looked at her like she'd suggested he miss breathing. "Not for a single heartbeat. That wasn't living, Scarlet. It was existing. This?" He gestured to the chaos around them, the toys scattered across an elegant sitting room, the baby blankets draped over priceless furniture, the evidence of life being truly lived. "This is everything." The kingdom flourished under their joint rule. Nikolai's strength combined with Scarlet's wisdom created a balance that brought prosperity and peace. Alliances were strengthened, old grudges resolved, new trade routes established. The Mooncrest territory became known not just for its martial power, but for its fairness and innovation. And at the heart of it all was their family, the symbol of hope and continuity that the people rallied around. When the royal family appeared in public, citizens crowded forward not in fear, but in affection, eager to catch a glimpse of their beloved king and queen, curious about the twin heirs who represented the future. Scarlet learned to carry her crown with grace, learned to speak with authority when needed, learned to make difficult decisions that served the greater good. But she never forgot the quiet Omega she'd been, the girl who'd endured her sister's cruelty because she knew something better was coming. That patience, that ability to endure temporary pain for future joy, served her well as queen. It taught her to think long-term, to plant seeds that would take years to grow, to trust that righteousness would ultimately prevail even when immediate circumstances seemed dark. "You're thinking again," Nikolai said one evening, finding her in her study long after she should have been in bed. "I can feel it through the bond. What troubles you, my love?" "Not troubles, reflections." Scarlet set down her pen and turned to face him. "I was thinking about that afternoon when Celeste called me fat, when she tried so hard to break me with her words. And I realized I pity her. She was so focused on tearing me down that she never built herself up. She wasted her energy on cruelty when she could have used it for creation." Scarlet smiled sadly. "I wonder sometimes if she's found peace wherever she ended up, if she's learned that happiness comes from within, not from diminishing others." Nikolai crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. "Your compassion astounds me. Even after everything she did, you hope for her redemption." "Of course. She's still my sister, however flawed. And besides," Scarlet looked up at him, "I got everything she wanted and more. I can afford to be generous." "My magnanimous queen." He kissed her forehead. "Come to bed. The twins will be awake in a few hours, demanding breakfast, and you need rest." She let him lead her to their chambers, to the massive bed they shared, to the warmth and safety of his embrace. This was her kingdom, she thought, as sleep claimed her. Not the territory outside these walls, but this space she'd carved out with Nikolai. This life they'd built from bond and blood and unwavering devotion. The twins' first birthday arrived with great celebration. The palace was decorated in silver and crimson. Guests arrived from across the territory, and a feast was prepared that would be talked about for years. But the best moment came not during the public festivities, but after, when the family retreated to their private chambers. Romulus and Remus, exhausted from the excitement, fell asleep almost immediately. Scarlet and Nikolai sat together watching them, these miracle children who'd changed everything. "A year ago," Nikolai said quietly, "we were keeping secrets, protecting them before they were even born. Now look at them. Real and solid and perfect." They're the best of both of us, Scarlet agreed. Your strength, your determination, my patience, my kindness, and their own spirits, unique and fierce. Romulus with his boldness, Remus with his thoughtful nature. They're going to be formidable men someday. Someday, but not yet. For now, they're just our babies. She leaned against him, comfortable in the easy intimacy they'd built. We did well, didn't we? Despite everything, despite the secrets and the struggles, we built something beautiful. We did more than that. We built a legacy. Nikolai's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. A family, a kingdom, a future that will extend far beyond our own lives. That's immortality, Scarlet. Not in conquering lands, but in creating love. The years unfolded like pages in a book, each one bringing new chapters, new challenges, new joys. The twins grew from babies to toddlers to young boys, their personalities solidifying, their bond with each other and their parents deepening. Romulus became the adventurous one, always pushing boundaries, always ready for the next challenge. He reminded Scarlet so much of Nikolai in his youth, before responsibility had tempered recklessness into courage. Remus was the thinker, the planner, the one who observed before acting. He would sit for hours with Scarlet in her study, asking questions about governance and justice, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. They complement each other perfectly, the royal tutor reported during one of his regular updates. Romulus inspires action, Remus provides strategy. Together, they'll be unstoppable as joint rulers when the time comes. That time was still far in the future, but Scarlet and Nikolai prepared their sons carefully, teaching them not just the mechanics of rule, but the philosophy behind it. Leadership was service, they emphasized. Power was responsibility. The crown was not a privilege, but a burden carried for the benefit of others. Do you think they understand? Scarlet asked Nikolai after a particularly intense lesson about resource distribution and fairness. They're young still, but they're learning. And they have something I never had. Loving parents who model healthy rule. They'll learn by watching us, by seeing how we treat each other and our people. He smiled. We're giving them the foundation I had to build for myself. That's the greatest gift we can offer. On quiet evenings, when the twins were asleep and the palace settled into peaceful silence, Scarlet and Nikolai would retreat to their chambers and simply exist together. Sometimes they talked, processing the day's events. Sometimes they made love, the bond between them as strong as ever. And sometimes they simply held each other, content in the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. Tell me again, Scarlet would say during those moments. Tell me how you felt when you first saw me. And Nikolai would tell the story, never tiring of it, the words slightly different each time, but the truth always the same. He'd seen her and known that she was his mate, his future, his reason for everything that came after. I was terrified, he always admitted. Terrified that I'd lose you before I ever had you, that you'd see me as the monster others did, that I wasn't worthy of the grace you carried so effortlessly. But you are worthy. You are worthy. The world sees the fierce alpha king, but I see the man who kneels to tie his son's shoes, who kisses my forehead every morning before duty calls, who rules with justice tempered by mercy. You made me that man. Before you, I was all edges and violence. You softened me, taught me there was strength in gentleness. We made each other, Scarlet corrected. You taught me my own strength, showed me I was more than the overlooked youngest sister. We're equals, Nikolai. Always have been. The 10th anniversary of their mating arrived during the height of summer, the territory lush and green, the air warm and sweet. The twins, now strapping boys of 9, organized a surprise celebration with the help of the palace staff, decorating the private gardens with flowers and lights. They worked so hard on this, Scarlet whispered to Nikolai. as they approached the surprise, pretending they hadn't known it was coming. Romulus wanted fire displays. Remus wanted poetry readings. They compromised on both. Like true diplomats. Nikolai's pride was evident. They're going to be fine rulers, love. Better than I ever was. You're an excellent ruler. Because I have an excellent partner. He took her hand, squeezing gently. Everything good in my life traces back to you, Scarlet. You're the root from which all blessings grow. The celebration was perfect because it was genuine, filled with laughter and love rather than political maneuvering. The twins presented their parents with gifts they'd made themselves, crude but heartfelt. Romulus had carved wooden wolves, one for each parent, while Remus had written a poem about family and loyalty that brought tears to Scarlet's eyes. "We're the luckiest boys in the kingdom," Remus said during his speech, his serious face so like his father's. "We have parents who love each other and us, who rule fairly, who show us every day what it means to be good people as well as good leaders. When we're grown and ruling," Romulus added, his enthusiasm bubbling over, "we want to be just like you, strong and kind and fair." Scarlet looked at Nikolai, saw her own emotion reflected in his dark eyes. This was what they'd built. Not just heirs or political stability, but good young men who understood that power came with responsibility, that leadership meant service. "You're already better than we dared hope," Nikolai told his sons, his voice thick with feeling. "Never doubt that." That night, alone again in their chambers, Scarlet and Nikolai reflected on the decade they'd shared. 10 years since that moment when Celeste had called her fat, unknowing that she carried the future of the kingdom. 10 years since she'd endured humiliation with quiet strength, knowing better days were coming. "Would you change anything?" Nikolai asked. "If you could go back, knowing what you know now." Scarlet thought about the pain, the secrecy, the struggle. But she also thought about the strength those challenges had forged, the lessons learned, the foundation built through adversity. "No," she said finally. "Every difficult moment led us here. The secrets taught us patience. Celeste's cruelty taught us compassion. The struggle taught us the value of what we have. I wouldn't trade any of it. Not even the part where you had to endure being called fat while carrying our sons. Especially not that part. It taught me that words only have the power we give them, that the truth matters more than perception, that temporary discomfort is a small price for permanent joy." She smiled. "Besides, watching Celeste's face when she realized I'd been pregnant the whole time, that was worth every insult." Nikolai laughed, pulling her close. "My fierce queen. You let her think she'd won, then revealed you'd been holding the ultimate victory card all along. I learned from the best. You taught me strategy, patience, the long game." Scarlet settled against him, comfortable and complete. "We're a good team. The best team." He kissed the top of her head. "Here's to 10 more years, to 20, to a lifetime of mornings waking beside you, of watching our sons grow into men, of building this kingdom into something that outlasts us both." "To forever," Scarlet agreed, "however long that may be." And in the quiet of their chambers, with their sons sleeping safely nearby and the kingdom peaceful beyond the windows, Scarlet felt complete. She'd started as the overlooked sister, the quiet Omega no one noticed. She'd endured cruelty and kept secrets and trusted that her patience would be rewarded. And it had been. Beyond her wildest dreams, beyond any reasonable expectation, she'd been given everything. A mate who loved her with fierce devotion. Sons who were growing into fine young men. A kingdom that flourished under her and Nikolai's combined rule. A life filled with purpose and meaning and bone-deep satisfaction. The girl who'd stood in her family's estate, accepting her sister's insults with quiet dignity, could never have imagined this future. But the woman she'd become understood that every moment of that journey, every challenge and triumph, had been necessary to bring her to this place of peace. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Nikolai's voice was drowsy, content. "For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. Always," he murmured. "From that first moment to the last, you're mine and I'm yours. Nothing changes that." And wrapped in his arms, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built together, Scarlett let herself drift into sleep, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, as they always had, as they always would. The fierce Alpha King and his wise Omega Queen, the twins who would inherit their legacy. A family forged in secret, revealed in triumph, sustained by love that conquered every challenge. This was their story. A story that began with cruelty, but transformed into grace. A story that started with secrets but ended in truth. A story that proved love, patience, and quiet strength could overcome any obstacle, could build kingdoms from nothing, could turn pain into purpose and struggle into joy. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Not the crown or the kingdom or the power, but the love that made it all worthwhile. The bond that connected them across space and time, unbreakable and eternal. They had won. Not against enemies or rivals, but against doubt and fear and the belief that they weren't enough. They had proven themselves worthy, not to the world, but to each other. And that, Scarlett thought as sleep claimed her, was everything. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.